For nearly a century, society has told us the same story. Get out there, be social, say yes to every invitation, fill your calendar until there's no room left to breathe. But what of the people who've been staying home, the ones who choose quiet Friday nights over crowded bars, the ones who feel most alive in their own space? What if they've been right all along? What if staying home isn't about missing out, but about discovering something most people never find? Tonight we explore the hidden science, the quiet psychology, and the surprising truth about people who love staying home. And you might just discover that the life you've been living in your own four walls is far richer than anyone ever told you it could be. Hello there, and welcome to the Slumbering Archive. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight, and I hope this journey brings you both peace and understanding. Whether you're settling in after a long day, curled up in your favorite spot, or drifting gently towards sleep, let's take this time together to explore something deeply personal, the quiet joy of staying home, the science behind why some of us feel most ourselves when we're alone, and why that preference, far from being something to fix or overcome, might actually be one of the wisest choices we can make. You've had a long day, haven't you? The world asked things of you, expected things from you, and now here you are, in the one place where you can finally let all of that go. Tonight, we're not just talking about staying home. We're exploring what happens inside the mind and body when we choose stillness over stimulation, when we pick peace over performance, when we decide that our own company is enough. There's nothing you need to do right now but relax. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing find its own rhythm. And let's wander together through the gentle science of what it really means to love being home. If you find comfort in these explorations, if this feels like a conversation you've been waiting to have, consider subscribing to the Slumbering Archive. It helps others find their way to these quiet corners of understanding. And if you'd like, share in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Are you in your bedroom, on your favorite couch, in that one chair that fits you just right? I'd love to know. But for now, let's begin. Let's start with something simple, something you might have felt but never quite understood. Why does home feel different from everywhere else? There's a particular sensation that happens when you close the door behind you at the end of the day. The world, with all its noise and expectation, stays on the other side. And something inside you, something that's been held tight all day, finally begins to loosen. Psychologists have studied this moment, this threshold between the outer world and the inner sanctuary, and they've found something fascinating. The human nervous system doesn't just register home as a location, it registers it as a state of being. Think about that for a moment. Your body knows the difference between out there and in here. It knows it at a cellular level, in the patterns of your heartbeat, in the chemicals moving through your brain, in the way your muscles hold or release tension. When you step into your home, especially when you live alone or have time to yourself, the sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for keeping you alert and responsive to the outside world, it begins to quiet. And the parasympathetic system, the one that supports rest and restoration, it gently rises to take its place. This isn't just relaxation. This is your body recognizing safety, true safety, the kind that doesn't require vigilance or performance, or the constant small adjustments we make when we're around other people, even people we love. In a study published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology in 2018, researchers found that participants' cortisol levels, the hormone associated with stress, dropped significantly within just 15 minutes of being alone in their own homes. But here's what made the study remarkable. The drop was most pronounced in people who reported actually enjoying their alone time, who chose to be home rather than feeling forced into it. Their bodies responded to solitude not as isolation, but as restoration. Let your mind settle on that. Your preference for staying home isn't antisocial. It's physiological. It's your nervous system seeking the conditions it needs to repair itself from the accumulated weight of being in the world. And this brings us to something crucial, something that separates people who love staying home into two very different groups. There are those for whom home is a refuge, a place of genuine peace and replenishment, and then there are those for whom home has become a hiding place, a way to avoid something that feels too difficult to face. The difference between these two experiences, between choosing solitude and escaping into it, this is where we need to tread carefully and with compassion. Think about how you feel on a Friday evening, when the week has ended and the weekend stretches out before you. If someone invites you out and you decline, how does that decision sit in your body? Does it feel like relief, like coming home to yourself? Or does it feel like fear, like closing a door against something you wish you could face but can't quite manage? Psychologists who study solitude preference make this distinction very clear. Healthy solitude, the kind that replenishes and strengthens, it comes from a place of fullness. You're not running from connection. You're choosing the particular kind of connection that works for you. The connection with yourself, with your thoughts, with the quiet rhythms that get drowned out in busier environments. But when solitude becomes avoidance, when home becomes the only place that feels safe because everywhere else triggers anxiety or shame or overwhelming exhaustion, that's when the pattern shifts from preference to protection. Neither one is wrong, you understand. Both are the nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do, trying to keep you safe, trying to give you what you need. But it helps to know which one you're experiencing, because the path forward, the way you relate to your love of home, it looks different depending on whether you're resting or hiding. For now, let's assume you're here because home genuinely fills you up, because solitude is where you feel most like yourself. And let's explore what science tells us about why that might be, and why it might actually be a profound strength rather than something to apologize for. The human brain is an extraordinary organ, constantly processing thousands of signals every single second. Light and shadow, sound and silence, the micro expressions on other people's faces, the tone beneath their words, the emotional temperature of every room you enter. And all of this processing, it happens mostly outside your conscious awareness. You don't think about reading someone's body language. You just do it. You don't decide to track the mood of a conversation. Your brain does it automatically. But here's what researchers have discovered. This constant processing, this vigilance, it requires an enormous amount of energy. Cognitive scientists call it the social processing load, and it's one of the most resource-intensive activities the human brain performs. Every social interaction, even pleasant ones, even interactions with people you love deeply, they draw from a finite well of mental energy. For some people, this energy replenishes through more social contact. Extroverts, they recharge by being around others. Their brains are wired to find stimulation rewarding, to gain energy from the very activities that drain others. But for people who prefer solitude, the equation works differently. Social interaction, no matter how positive, depletes the well. And the only thing that refills it is time alone. Genuine, uninterrupted, unpressured time alone. In a 2017 study from the University of California, researchers used brain imaging to examine what happens in the minds of introverts versus extroverts during social interaction. They found something remarkable. The introverted participants showed significantly higher activation in their prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for complex thinking and decision-making, during even casual social exchanges. Their brains were working harder to process the same interactions that extroverts handled with much less cognitive effort. Think about what that means. For some people, socializing is genuinely effortless, a natural state that feels like home. But for others, every conversation is like solving a puzzle, reading between the lines, monitoring their own responses, staying attuned to subtle shifts in energy and meaning. It's not that they can't do it, they absolutely can, often with great skill and warmth, but it costs them something, and home is where they get to stop paying that cost. When you're alone in your own space, the prefrontal cortex finally gets to rest. The constant interpretation of social signals stops. The brain can redirect that tremendous processing power toward other things. Reflection, creativity, problem solving, or sometimes beautifully toward nothing at all. Just the gentle drift of thought without purpose or direction. This is why people who love staying home often report that their best ideas come to them in solitude. Not because they're smarter or more creative than anyone else, but because their minds finally have the space to wander, to make unexpected connections, to follow trains of thought all the way to their quiet destinations. Let yourself feel that, if you can. The particular quality of thought that only happens when you're alone. The way ideas seem to arrive rather than being forced. The way you can hold a question in your mind and turn it slowly, examining it from angles you'd never notice in the rush of conversation. Home becomes more than just a physical place. It becomes the environment where your mind can fully express itself, where the inner world, so often overshadowed by the outer one, finally gets its turn to speak. And this brings us to something that might surprise you, something that goes against almost everything our culture tells us about happiness and fulfillment. We're taught that joy comes from experiences, from being out in the world, from making memories and saying yes and filling our lives with people and events and stimulation. And for many people, that's absolutely true. Their happiness is directly connected to novelty, to social richness, to the energy of being around others. But research suggests that people who prefer staying home experience joy differently. They find it in repetition rather than novelty, in depth rather than breadth, in the small, unremarkable moments that others might not even notice. There's a term psychologists use for this. Low stimulation preference. It's not a disorder or a deficit. It's simply a different set point for what the nervous system finds rewarding. People with low stimulation preference don't need the world to entertain them. They don't require constant input or variety to feel satisfied. Their inner world is rich enough, complex enough, engaging enough on its own. Think about your morning coffee routine, the way you make it exactly the same way every time. The particular mug you prefer, the spot where you sit to drink it. To someone who craves novelty, this might seem boring, even depressing. The same thing every single day. But for you, if you're someone who loves staying home, this routine isn't boring. It's anchoring. It's a small ritual that says, you're here, you're safe, this is your time. In a study published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, researchers found that people who reported high satisfaction with repetitive, solitary activities showed different patterns of dopamine response than those who sought novelty. Their brains release dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward, in response to familiar, predictable experiences. They literally found joy in the sameness that others might find stultifying. Let that sink in for a moment. Your preference for the familiar, for the quiet routines of home life, it's not about lacking imagination or settling for less. It's about having a nervous system that finds genuine reward in stability and repetition. You're not missing out on joy, you're experiencing it in a different key. And there's something else, something even deeper, that happens when we choose to stay home. Something about control and agency and the particular kind of freedom that only comes from being in charge of your own environment. Out there, in the world, so much is unpredictable. Other people's moods and needs and expectations, the noise level in a restaurant, the energy of a crowd, the timing of events, the 1,000 small variables that you can't control but must constantly adapt to. And for some people, this unpredictability is exciting, energizing even. But for others, it's exhausting. At home, you control almost everything. The lighting, the temperature, the sounds, the pace. Whether you want music or silence, company or solitude, activity or rest. This isn't about being controlling in a negative sense. It's about having agency over your sensory and emotional environment. And for people with high sensitivity or anxiety or simply a lower threshold for stimulation, this agency isn't a luxury, it's essential for well-being. Psychologists studying environmental psychology have found that perceived control over one's environment is one of the strongest predictors of stress reduction and emotional stability. When people feel they can shape their surroundings to match their needs, their nervous systems regulate more effectively. Cortisol levels stabilize. Heart rate variability improves. The body interprets the environment as safe, and all the restorative processes that depend on safety can finally unfold. Think about how you arrange your space, the way everything has its place, the way you know exactly where things are, the way the lighting is just right, not too bright, not too dim, the way you've created, perhaps without even consciously trying, an environment that fits you like a favorite sweater. This isn't obsessive or antisocial. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it's supposed to do, creating the conditions for rest and restoration. Out there, you adapt yourself to the environment, but at home, the environment adapts to you. And that reversal, that shift from constant adjustment to being exactly as you are, it's profoundly healing. Let's pause here and consider something you might not have thought about consciously. The way you've built your home, not just physically but emotionally and psychologically, into a reflection of your deepest needs. Every choice you've made about your space, even the ones that seem random or practical, they're actually expressions of what your nervous system requires to feel safe. The soft blanket on the couch that you reach for without thinking. The particular arrangement of pillows on your bed. The lighting you've chosen, probably softer than what most people prefer. The sounds you allow in, the sounds you keep out. Environmental psychologists have found that people who prefer staying home tend to create what they call microenvironments, highly personalized spaces that meet very specific sensory and emotional needs. These aren't just decorated rooms. They're carefully calibrated sanctuaries, fine-tuned over time through trial and error until they feel exactly right. And what's remarkable is that your body knows when you've got it right. When you walk into a room in your home and everything feels aligned, when the temperature and lighting and sounds and textures all come together in just the right way, Your nervous system responds immediately. Your breathing deepens. Your muscles release tension you didn't know you were holding. The background hum of anxiety that follows you through the outside world finally quiets. This response isn't about luxury or expensive furnishings. Some of the most perfectly calibrated home environments exist in small apartments, in modest houses, in single rooms. What matters isn't the size or cost of the space. What matters is how precisely it matches what you need. Think about your favorite spot in your home. Maybe it's a particular chair. Maybe it's a corner of your bed. Maybe it's a window seat where the light falls just right at certain times of day. What is it about that spot that makes it yours? What does your body know about it that your mind hasn't quite put into words? Chances are, that spot offers something the outside world can't. Maybe it's the way you can see the room but feel slightly enclosed, protected. Maybe it's the softness beneath you or around you. Maybe it's the way sounds are muffled there, creating a pocket of quiet in an otherwise noisy world. Research from the field of neuroarchitecture, which studies how built environments affect the brain, shows that people with high sensitivity to stimulation unconsciously create spaces that reduce sensory load. They choose furniture that feels protective. They position themselves with walls at their back. They control sight lines so they're not constantly monitoring peripheral movement. They create what researchers call defensible space, environments where the nervous system can finally stop scanning for threats. This isn't paranoia. It's not about actual danger. It's about creating an environment where your ancient animal nervous system, the part that's always watching for what might go wrong, can finally rest. At home, in your carefully calibrated space, that primitive part of your brain can whisper, "Safe. You're safe here. You can let your guard down." And when that happens, when the deepest parts of your nervous system truly settle, everything changes. Thoughts become clearer. Emotions become more accessible. Creativity flows more easily. The clenched feeling that you carry through the world finally releases. Your home isn't just where you live. It's a therapeutic environment you've created, perhaps without even knowing that's what you were doing. Every choice you've made to increase comfort, to reduce stimulation, to create predictability and control, these are acts of profound self-care. They're you listening to what your body needs and giving it what it asks for. So when people ask why you prefer staying home, when they don't understand what the big deal is, remember this: they're not living in your nervous system. They don't feel what you feel. They don't need what you need. And the fact that you've learned to recognize your needs and meet them, that's not weakness. That's extraordinary wisdom. There's another aspect of staying home that deserves exploration. Something about how time itself becomes different when you're not operating on the world's schedule. Out there, time is divided into discrete units: appointments, deadlines, the start time of a movie or a dinner reservation. Even leisure time with friends has a temporal structure to it, a beginning and an end, a pace that's negotiated between multiple people's rhythms and needs. But at home alone, especially when you have no obligations, time becomes fluid in a way that's almost impossible to achieve otherwise. You can start something without knowing when you'll finish it. You can follow a train of thought for hours without interruption. You can let a simple task, making tea, reading a few pages, looking out the window, expand to fill whatever space it needs. Psychologists studying time perception have found something fascinating. People consistently report that time feels more spacious, more abundant, when they're engaged in self-directed solitary activities. It's not that they have more time, but the subjective experience of time changes dramatically. In a 2020 study published in the Journal of Consciousness Studies, researchers asked participants to estimate how much time had passed during various activities. Those engaged in social activities or structured tasks consistently underestimated the time, feeling like it had passed quickly. But those engaged in solitary, self-directed activities showed the opposite pattern. They overestimated the time, feeling like they'd had more of it than they actually did. The researchers' interpretation was revealing. When you're following your own rhythm, when you're not constantly checking the clock or coordinating with others, your experience of time expands. Each moment feels fuller, more inhabitable. You're not skimming across the surface of experience, rushing from one thing to the next. You're sinking into it, dwelling in it, allowing it to unfold at its natural pace. Think about a Sunday afternoon when you have absolutely nothing planned. No commitments, no expectations, just open time stretching out before you. How does that feel different from a Sunday afternoon packed with activities, even fun activities? The open afternoon feels longer, doesn't it? Richer, like you actually have time to breathe, to think, to be. The busy afternoon, even if you enjoy what you're doing, feels compressed, like you're moving through it quickly. Ticking off items, getting to the next thing. This expansion of subjective time when you're home alone, it's not laziness, it's not wasting time, it's actually experiencing time more fully than is possible in the rush of structured activity. And there's a paradox here that's worth sitting with. In a culture obsessed with productivity, with making the most of every moment, the people who actually experience the most time, who feel like they have abundant time rather than scarce time, are often the ones who do the least, who allow themselves to simply be rather than constantly do. Your preference for staying home, for having unstructured time, for following your own rhythm rather than the world's frantic pace, you're not falling behind. You're stepping out of the race altogether. And from that perspective, you can actually see how arbitrary the race is, how much of it is about appearing busy rather than being fulfilled. There's a term from Buddhist philosophy that applies here: temporal spaciousness. The feeling that you have enough time, that time is not your enemy, that you can move through your life at a human pace rather than a machine pace. And that spaciousness, that sense of having enough, it's one of the most profound forms of wealth available to us. You cultivate it every time you choose to stay home instead of rushing out. Every time you let a simple moment expand instead of hurrying to the next thing. Every time you give yourself permission to exist at your own pace rather than the pace the world demands. This is why time at home often feels restorative in a way that even vacations don't. Vacations are often packed with activities, with seeing and doing and experiencing as much as possible in limited time. You come back exhausted, feeling like you need a vacation from your vacation. But time at home, quiet time with nothing particular to accomplish, that actually replenishes your sense of temporal abundance. You remember what it feels like to have enough time, to not be rushed, to live at a pace that feels sustainable rather than frantic. In our final years, if we're fortunate enough to reflect back on our lives, we probably won't remember the busy weekends, the social obligations we forced ourselves to fulfill, the times we said yes when we wanted to say no. Those moments blur together, indistinguishable from each other. But the quiet times, the afternoons where nothing happened and everything happened, where we sat with ourselves and felt completely at peace, those are the moments that stand out. Those are the moments where we were most fully alive, most completely ourselves. Your preference for staying home is giving you more of those moments, more time where you're actually present for your own life instead of rushing through it. And that's not time wasted. That might be the only time that actually counts. Now let's talk about something that's often overlooked in discussions about staying home: the body's wisdom, the way your physical self knows what it needs, even when your mind is confused by cultural messages about what you should want. Your body carries information that your conscious mind doesn't have access to. It knows through sensation and response what environments support your well-being and what environments deplete you. And if you're someone who prefers staying home, your body has been trying to tell you that for a long time. Think about how your body feels when you're out in a crowded, loud environment versus how it feels when you're home alone and quiet. Really think about the physical sensations. Out there, you might notice your jaw clenching without your awareness, your shoulders creeping up toward your ears, a tension in your stomach that you've learned to ignore, your breathing becoming shallow, your senses on high alert, scanning the environment for potential disruptions, your entire musculature in a subtle state of readiness, as if preparing for something that never quite comes. But at home, especially after you've been there long enough for the transition to complete, your body softens, your jaw unclenches, your shoulders drop, your belly relaxes, your breathing deepens. The background tension you didn't know you were carrying releases, sometimes all at once, sometimes in slow waves. This isn't imagination. This is your autonomic nervous system responding to environmental cues, shifting from sympathetic activation, the fight or flight state, to parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest state, and your body knows which environment supports which state. Somatic therapists, practitioners who work with the body's stored experiences and responses, talk about something called interoception. That's your ability to sense what's happening inside your body, to read the subtle signals that indicate stress or safety, depletion or replenishment. People with strong interoception, people who've learned to listen to their bodies, often develop clear preferences about environments and activities based not on what they think they should enjoy, but on what their bodies tell them is nourishing. And here's what's interesting. People who prefer staying home often have higher interoceptive awareness than those who are constantly seeking external stimulation. They've learned to notice subtle bodily signals. They can feel the difference between genuine tiredness and avoidance, between restorative solitude and isolating loneliness, between their body saying rest here and their body saying you're hiding. This body wisdom, this ability to listen to and trust your physical responses, it's a skill that serves you in every area of life. It helps you make better decisions about relationships, recognizing when someone's presence leaves you feeling drained versus energized. It helps you make better decisions about work, noticing when an environment or role is slowly depleting you, even if it looks good on paper. It helps you make better decisions about how to spend your time, trusting your body's feedback about what actually nourishes you versus what culture says should nourish you. Your body has been your ally all along, gently steering you toward home, toward quiet, toward the environments where it can function optimally. And every time you honor that pull, every time you choose to stay home, when your body is asking for that, you're strengthening your relationship with your own physical wisdom. Think about other animals for a moment. a cat finding the sunny spot on the floor, a dog circling to create the perfect resting place, birds returning to the same tree each evening. We don't judge animals for seeking the conditions where their bodies feel safe and comfortable. We recognize it as natural wisdom, an instinct worth trusting. You have that same wisdom, that same instinct toward the environments where your body can rest, where your nervous system can regulate, where you can exist without constant vigilance. Your preference for staying home might be the most profound form of body wisdom you have. The recognition that this space, this controlled environment, this familiar territory is where your physical self can thrive. So when your mind starts questioning whether you should be doing something different, something more social or more exciting, check in with your body. What does it actually want? What does it actually need? Chances are your body will tell you clearly. And if the answer is home, if the answer is quiet, if the answer is solitude, trust that. Your body knows things your mind has been taught to doubt. And in the conversation between cultural expectations and physical wisdom, your body deserves to win. Now let's explore something that connects deeply with this body wisdom, something about the nervous system's need for what researchers call recovery architecture. This is the framework your body builds over time to help you return to baseline after stress, and it's one of the most important yet overlooked aspects of staying home. Every day, your nervous system accumulates what scientists call allostatic load. This is the cumulative wear and tear on your body from responding to stress, both big and small. A difficult conversation, a crowded commute, the background noise of an open office, the effort of making small talk, the constant low-level anxiety of navigating public spaces. Each of these experiences activates your stress response system, and while your body is designed to handle this, it's also designed to recover from it. But here's where modern life creates a problem. We're experiencing more frequent stressors with less time for recovery between them. We move from one stimulating environment to another, from work to errands to social obligations, rarely giving our nervous systems the deep rest they need to fully reset. Home is where that reset happens. Not just surface relaxation, but the deep physiological recovery that allows your body to process and release the accumulated stress of being in the world. And this recovery isn't instantaneous. It takes time, real time, the kind of uninterrupted, unpressured time that you can only find when you're home with no demands on your attention or energy. Researchers studying stress recovery have found that people need different amounts of downtime depending on their baseline sensitivity to stimulation. Some people can recover quickly, needing just an hour or two of quiet before they're ready to engage again. Others need days, and neither pattern is wrong, it's just biology. If you're someone who needs significant recovery time, who feels depleted after social interaction even when it was pleasant, who requires long stretches at home to feel like yourself again, you're not being antisocial. You're honoring your nervous system's actual recovery needs. And denying those needs, pushing yourself to maintain a pace that doesn't allow for adequate recovery, that's not strength. That's a recipe for burnout. Think about what happens when you don't give yourself enough recovery time. Maybe you've experienced this. A week of too many commitments, too much stimulation, too little solitude. And at the end of it, you don't just feel tired. You feel frayed, raw, like your nerves are exposed. Small things irritate you. You're quicker to tears or anger. You can't think clearly. Your body aches in ways that have nothing to do with physical exertion. This is what an overloaded nervous system feels like. It's not a character flaw. It's not you being weak or oversensitive. It's your body trying desperately to tell you that it needs rest, needs home, needs the particular kind of recovery that only happens in solitude and safety. Now let's talk about something fascinating that happens during this recovery time. Something researchers are only beginning to understand about the brain's maintenance processes. When you're awake and engaged with the world, your brain is constantly forming new connections, taking in information, responding to stimuli. This is necessary and good, but it's also metabolically expensive, and it creates what neuroscientists call neural noise, the accumulation of cellular waste products and the strengthening of some neural pathways at the expense of others. During deep rest, particularly during sleep, but also during quiet waking rest at home, your brain activates what's called the glymphatic system. This is essentially the brain's waste removal system, and it works most effectively when you're deeply relaxed, when external stimulation is minimal, when your brain waves shift into the slower patterns associated with rest. The glymphatic system clears out the metabolic waste that builds up during waking activity, including proteins that, if allowed to accumulate, are associated with cognitive decline and neurological disease. It's like your brain is taking out the trash, and it can only do this work effectively when you're not asking it to do anything else. But here's what's remarkable. This system doesn't just activate during sleep. It also activates during deeply restful waking states. The kind of state you enter when you're home alone, not trying to accomplish anything, just existing in quiet. When you're lying on your couch, staring at the ceiling, letting your mind wander. When you're sitting in your favorite chair, watching the light change as afternoon becomes evening. When you're doing what others might call nothing, but what your brain experiences as essential maintenance time. So when someone suggests that you're wasting time by staying home, by not being more active or social or productive, you can know this. Your brain is literally cleaning itself. You're giving your nervous system the conditions it needs not just to rest, but to repair, to maintain the cellular health that allows you to think clearly, feel deeply, and function well. This isn't laziness. This is essential biological maintenance that modern culture has systematically devalued because it doesn't look productive from the outside. But from the inside, from the perspective of your brain and nervous system, it might be the most important work you do. Let's explore another dimension of this, something about memory consolidation and emotional processing that happens primarily at home, in quiet. Your brain doesn't just passively record experiences. It actively processes them, deciding what to keep and what to let go, integrating new information with existing knowledge, making sense of emotional experiences by connecting them to similar past experiences. And this processing happens primarily during rest, particularly during the kind of unfocused mental time you have when you're home alone. Have you noticed how sometimes a problem that seemed impossible at work suddenly has an obvious solution when you're at home, thinking about something completely different? Or how emotions that were overwhelming in the moment become more manageable after you've had time alone to process them? This isn't coincidence. This is your brain doing the work it can only do when it's not actively engaged with new stimulation. Research in cognitive neuroscience shows that memory consolidation, the process by which short-term memories become long-term ones, happens primarily during sleep and during wakeful rest. When you're actively engaged with the world, your brain is in acquisition mode, taking in new information, but it can't simultaneously organize and integrate that information. That happens later, during downtime. People who don't give themselves adequate downtime often report feeling overwhelmed by information, like they can't keep up, like they're constantly playing catch-up with their own lives. And that's exactly what's happening at a neural level. They're taking in more information than their brains have time to process and organize. It's like trying to file paperwork while someone keeps dumping more papers on your desk. Eventually, everything becomes a chaotic pile, but when you spend significant time at home, when you give your brain regular periods of low stimulation rest, you allow that filing to happen. Experiences get processed, memories get stored properly. Emotional experiences get integrated so they don't remain as unprocessed, overwhelming fragments. The chaotic pile becomes an organized filing system. This is why time alone often brings clarity, not because solitude makes you smarter, but because it gives your brain the space to do its organizational work, to make sense of your experiences, to connect dots that couldn't be connected in the moment, to understand what happened and what it means and how you feel about it. Think about a difficult conversation you had recently. In the moment, you might have felt confused, overwhelmed, uncertain about what you were feeling or what it all meant. But after time at home, time to yourself, the situation probably became clearer. You understood your own reactions better. You could see patterns you couldn't see in the moment. You knew what you needed to say or do next. That clarity didn't come from thinking harder about the problem. It came from giving your brain the processing time it needed. And that processing time, that's one of the most valuable things staying home gives you. Not an escape from life, but the mental space to understand your life more deeply. Now let's talk about something that might feel uncomfortable but needs to be addressed. The relationship between staying home and grief, loss, and healing from difficult experiences. Sometimes the pull toward home isn't just about preference or sensitivity or introversion. Sometimes it's about protection, about creating a safe space to heal from something that hurt you. And that's not just okay, that's necessary. That's your psyche doing exactly what it should be doing. If you've experienced loss, trauma, betrayal, profound disappointment, if the world has hurt you in ways that are still tender, then your desire to stay home might have a protective quality to it. You're not hiding exactly, though it might feel that way sometimes. You're creating the conditions for healing, and healing requires safety. It requires space. It requires not being constantly triggered by the unpredictability of the outside world. Trauma therapists talk about the importance of establishing a sense of safety before attempting to process difficult experiences. And for many people, home is where that safety exists. It's the one place where you're not constantly on alert, not scanning for threats, not bracing against the possibility of more pain. If this resonates with you, if part of your love of staying home comes from needing a place to heal, then please know this: there's no timeline for healing. There's no point at which you should be over it, ready to fully engage with the world again. Your healing will take as long as it takes. And staying home while that happens isn't weakness, it's wisdom. But also know this: healing isn't the same as hiding. And over time, as you do heal, you might notice that the pull toward home starts to feel different. Less about protection and more about preference. Less about avoiding pain and more about choosing peace. That shift, when it happens, is a sign that the acute healing phase is passing, that you're ready for something different. And if that shift hasn't happened yet, if you're still in the deep part of healing, where home feels like the only safe place, that's okay too. Give yourself that safety. Don't let anyone rush you. Your psyche knows what it needs. Trust that. Sometimes staying home is about recovery from specific trauma. Other times, it's about recovering from the accumulated micro-traumas of simply existing in a world that wasn't designed for sensitive people. Both are valid. Both deserve respect and space. Let's talk now about something that connects to this. Something about the concept of boundaries and the particular way that staying home helps you maintain them. When you're out in the world, your boundaries are constantly being tested, negotiated, sometimes violated. Someone stands too close. A conversation goes into territory that makes you uncomfortable. You're expected to perform happiness or engagement when you're actually tired or sad. You're touched when you don't want to be. You're talked at when you need quiet. The demands on your boundaries are relentless. At home, your boundaries are intact by default. No one enters your space without permission. No one demands your attention unless you choose to give it. You can be exactly as open or closed as you need to be. Your physical space is your own. Your emotional space is your own. Your energy is your own. This isn't selfishness. This is the fundamental human need for autonomy over your own body and mind and space. And for some people, that autonomy is so rarely available in the outside world that home becomes the only place they can truly experience it. Think about what it's like to have complete control over your own space and time, to not have to explain or justify or negotiate, to be able to say no to any demand simply by not being available for it, to have your physical and emotional boundaries be automatically respected rather than constantly challenged. That's a form of freedom that's increasingly rare in modern life. And if you've found that freedom at home, if you've built a life that protects your autonomy and honors your boundaries, that's something to celebrate, not something to apologize for. Boundary researchers have found that people with strong boundaries actually form healthier relationships than those with weak or permeable boundaries. They're better able to communicate their needs, less likely to become resentful, more capable of genuine intimacy because they're not constantly feeling invaded or depleted. Your time at home, your practice of honoring your own boundaries, it's training you in this essential skill. Every time you choose to stay home when you need to, you're practicing boundary setting. Every time you protect your energy by saying no to demands that don't serve you, you're strengthening your boundary muscles. And those muscles will serve you in every relationship and situation in your life. So when guilt tries to tell you that you're being selfish or antisocial by staying home, remember this: you're not taking away from others by honoring your boundaries. You're actually becoming someone who can show up more authentically in the relationships that matter. Because you're not depleted, you're not resentful, you're not constantly operating from a place of obligation and depletion. Now let's explore something that might seem contradictory at first: the way that staying home can actually enhance your connection to the wider world, to nature, to the cycles and rhythms that get lost in the noise of constant activity. When you're rushing from one thing to another, when your calendar is packed and your attention is fragmented, you lose touch with the subtle changes happening around you. The seasons shifting, the light changing throughout the day, the particular quality of a Tuesday afternoon versus a Saturday morning. The small natural events, a bird at your window, rain beginning to fall, wind moving through trees. But when you spend significant time at home, especially if your home has windows that let you observe the outside world, you start to notice these things again. You become attuned to patterns you'd otherwise miss. You watch the same tree through all its seasons. You notice when the birds return in spring. You see how the light hits your room differently in winter than in summer. This attention to natural cycles, this awareness of the living world beyond human activity, it's deeply grounding. It connects you to something larger than yourself without requiring you to engage with the chaos and unpredictability of human social spaces. Research in environmental psychology has found that even indirect nature contact, viewing nature through a window, watching the sky, listening to rain, has measurable benefits for mental health and stress reduction. But these benefits require attention. You have to actually notice the nature you're exposed to. And noticing requires time and space and the kind of unhurried awareness that's almost impossible when you're constantly busy. People who stay home often develop rich relationships with their immediate environment. They know their neighborhood in ways that busier people don't. They notice small changes. They recognize patterns. They become observers of their small piece of the world. And that observation creates a sense of connection and belonging that's different from social connection, but equally valuable. You might know which neighbor keeps what schedule, when the mail usually comes, what birds visit your area at what times of year, how the temperature shifts throughout the day, where the light is best for reading at different times. These might seem like trivial observations, but they're actually profound. They're you being present for your actual life in your actual location, rather than constantly projecting your attention elsewhere. This rooted attention, this deep familiarity with your immediate environment, it's becoming increasingly rare. Most people move through their days barely noticing their surroundings, their attention pulled towards screens and schedules, and the abstract demands of modern life. But you, by staying home, by being present in your space, you're maintaining a form of attention that humans have practiced for millennia, the attention of place, the knowing of home, and there's something deeply satisfying about this kind of knowing, about understanding your environment intimately, about having a relationship with your place that's based on sustained attention rather than passing through. You're not just occupying space, you're inhabiting it. And that inhabitation creates meaning that transcends the size or grandeur of the space itself. Let's talk now about something that often surprises people: the relationship between staying home and productivity, particularly creative productivity. There's a cultural myth that productivity requires hustle, networking, being out there making things happen. And for some kinds of work, that might be true. But for creative work, for deep work, for the kind of thinking and making that requires sustained focus and genuine originality, staying home might actually be the most productive choice you can make. Look at the biographies of great thinkers, writers, artists, scientists throughout history. A surprising number of them were essentially homebodies. They protected their time and energy fiercely. They said no to social obligations. They created routines that allowed for deep, uninterrupted focus. And that focus, that protection of their inner life and their time, that's what made their creative productivity possible. Virginia Woolf wrote about needing a room of one's own, not just physically, but temporally and psychologically, a space and time that was protected from intrusion, where the mind could do its deepest work. And that room, that protected space, it's exactly what staying home provides. When you're home, when you have hours of uninterrupted time, you can enter what psychologists call flow states. These are periods of deep focus where you lose track of time, where your work seems to emerge almost effortlessly, where you're completely absorbed in what you're doing. And flow states require specific conditions: no interruptions, no competing demands on your attention, a sense of safety and control. time pressure that's challenging but not overwhelming. All of these conditions are much easier to establish at home than in any other environment. At home, you control the interruptions, you set the schedule, you create the atmosphere that allows your mind to settle into deep work. Out in the world, you're constantly adapting to environments and situations designed by others. And that adaptation uses up the mental energy you need for creative work. Think about your most productive times. Chances are, many of them have happened at home, in those long stretches of uninterrupted solitude where you could sink fully into what you were doing. Not because being alone makes you more talented, but because it creates the conditions where your talents can actually express themselves. The modern workplace, with its open offices and constant collaboration and expectation of availability, it's almost perfectly designed to prevent flow states. Even remote work, if it's filled with video calls and instant messages and the expectation of immediate responsiveness, doesn't solve this problem. But when you're home alone, truly alone, with your time protected and your attention undivided, that's when the deepest work becomes possible. That's when you can think thoughts that take hours to develop. That's when you can work on projects that require sustained focus. That's when you can create things that actually matter instead of just responding to the constant small demands of a distracted world. Your preference for staying home might not be holding you back professionally or creatively. It might actually be the very thing that allows you to do your best work. And protecting that preference, that time, that space, it's not selfishness. It's the necessary condition for doing anything truly original or meaningful. Now let's explore something more vulnerable, the loneliness that can coexist with loving to be alone, and how to navigate that seemingly contradictory experience. It's possible to genuinely prefer solitude and still sometimes feel lonely, to want to be home and also wish for connection. To be perfectly content in your own company most of the time, but occasionally ache for someone to share it with. These contradictions aren't signs that something's wrong with you. They're signs that you're human, complex, containing multitudes. Loneliness and solitude are different experiences that can overlap in confusing ways. You can be lonely in a crowd and content in solitude. You can choose to be alone and still long for specific kinds of connection. The key is understanding what you're actually longing for when loneliness arises. Sometimes loneliness is about wanting to be seen, to have someone witness your life and confirm that it matters. Sometimes it's about wanting to share beauty or joy with someone who would appreciate it the way you do. Sometimes it's about wanting physical touch or presence in a way that has nothing to do with conversation or socializing. Sometimes it's about wanting depth of connection that's absent even when social contact is available. Pay attention to what your loneliness is asking for, because the solution to loneliness isn't necessarily more time with people. Sometimes it's different time with people. Quality over quantity, depth over breadth, seeing one person who really knows you rather than being in a room full of acquaintances. And sometimes, honestly, loneliness is just part of the human experience. A reminder that connection matters, even for those of us who need substantial solitude. You don't have to solve it or make it go away. You can just acknowledge it, feel it, and let it coexist with your genuine need for alone time. The goal isn't to eliminate loneliness by forcing yourself to be more social. The goal is to find the particular balance of solitude and connection that works for you. And that balance might look very different from what works for others. You might need one deep friendship rather than 10 casual ones. You might need a partner who understands your need for space within the relationship. You might need community that doesn't require constant participation. Whatever that balance is for you, it's valid. And the times when you feel lonely even while loving your solitude, those times don't negate your preference for being home. They just remind you that you're not meant to be completely isolated, that some thread of connection to others needs to remain even as you honor your need for significant time alone. Be gentle with this contradiction. Don't let loneliness convince you that your whole approach to life is wrong. Don't let your love of solitude convince you that any loneliness you feel is weakness. Both can be true. Both can coexist. And you can honor both without betraying either. Let's turn now to something practical but profound. The way staying home changes your relationship with consumption and capitalism. Modern consumer culture is built on the idea that happiness comes from acquiring things and experiences, and that both require you to be out in the world, shopping, dining, entertaining yourself. But when you stay home, when you find satisfaction in what you already have, in your own company, in simple pleasures, you step outside that economic system in ways that are quietly radical. Think about how much advertising is aimed at getting you out of your house. Restaurants and bars, entertainment venues, shopping destinations, vacation packages. All of these industries depend on people believing that staying home is boring, that real life happens out there, that you need to consume experiences to have a life worth living. But you've discovered something they don't want you to know. That contentment is possible without constant consumption. That joy can come from a home-cooked meal, a favorite book, a quiet evening in comfortable clothes. That you don't need to buy entertainment when you can entertain yourself. That experiences don't have to be expensive to be meaningful. This isn't about being cheap or depriving yourself. It's about recognizing that the constant push to consume more, experience more, spend more, it's not really about your happiness. It's about economic systems that profit from your dissatisfaction with what you already have. When you choose to stay home, you're choosing to find satisfaction in what's already present rather than constantly seeking it elsewhere. And that choice, that contentment, it's threatening to an economic system built on manufactured dissatisfaction. Economic research shows that people who report high life satisfaction, despite low spending on social activities and entertainment, tend to have better financial outcomes over time. Not because they're depriving themselves, but because they're not spending money trying to fill needs that can't be filled through consumption. They've found satisfaction in non-commercial activities, in relationships, in creative pursuits, in the simple pleasure of being comfortable in their own space. Your preference for staying home might be saving you not just money, but from the exhausting treadmill of working to earn money to spend on activities that are supposed to make you happy, but actually just create the need for more work and more spending. You've stepped off that treadmill, and the view from here, the perspective you gain from not being caught up in constant consumption, it's valuable beyond measure. This doesn't mean never going out or never spending money on experiences. It means having the freedom to choose based on what actually nourishes you, rather than feeling compelled to participate in expensive social rituals just to prove you're living well. Your quiet, inexpensive evenings at home, they're not evidence of a small life. They're evidence of a life that's found satisfaction outside the commercial realm. And that's increasingly rare and valuable. Now let's explore something that might feel deeply personal. The way staying home affects your sense of identity and how you understand yourself in relation to the world. In a culture that emphasizes doing, in achieving, and being seen, staying home can feel like disappearing. Like you're not making your mark, not building a visible identity, not existing in ways that others can witness and validate. And that can trigger deep questions about who you are and whether your life matters. But here's another way to think about it. Maybe your identity doesn't need to be built through external achievement and social visibility. Maybe the deepest, truest sense of who you are emerges not in doing, but in being. Not in how others see you, but in how you experience yourself when no one's watching. The ancient philosophers talked about this. The importance of knowing yourself, not as others define you, but as you actually are in your own private experience. And that knowing, that deep self-familiarity, it only develops in solitude. In the time you spend alone, unperformed, simply existing. When you stay home, when you spend significant time alone, you get to meet yourself in ways that are impossible when you're constantly in performance mode, constantly being reflected back through others' perceptions of you. You get to notice what you actually think and feel and want. Separate from what you've been told you should think and feel and want. This is profound work. This knowing of yourself, it's the foundation of everything else, of authentic relationships, because you know who you are and can bring that authentic self to connection. Of meaningful work, because you know what actually matters to you rather than just what looks impressive. Of satisfaction, because you're not constantly measuring yourself against external standards. People who spend significant time alone often develop a stronger sense of self than those who are constantly in social spaces. Not because they're selfish or self-obsessed, but because they've had time to discover who they actually are underneath all the social conditioning and performance. They know what they like and don't like, what energizes and depletes them, what they value and what they don't. And that knowledge makes them more solid, more grounded, less easily swayed by trends and opinions and pressure. Your time at home is building that foundation. Every hour you spend alone, being yourself without audience or judgment, you're deepening your relationship with the person you actually are. And that relationship, that self-knowing, it's the most important relationship you'll ever have. It affects everything else. So when staying home makes you question your identity, when you wonder if you're someone, if you're not visible and active in the world, remember this: you're becoming someone. Someone who knows themselves deeply. Someone who doesn't need constant external validation to know they exist and matter. Someone who's built an identity from the inside out rather than the outside in. And that someone is more real, more solid, more sustainable than any identity built solely on external achievement and social visibility. Let's talk now about something that weaves through everything we've discussed, the particular kind of strength that develops in people who are comfortable being alone. Strength is usually associated with facing challenges, with pushing through difficulty, with engaging with the world despite fear or obstacles. And that's one kind of strength. But there's another kind, equally important, that comes from being able to sit with yourself, to face your own thoughts and feelings without needing to escape or distract or numb. Being alone means there's nowhere to hide from yourself. Your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, your fears, they all surface when there's nothing external to focus on. And staying present with all of that, not frantically distracting yourself, not filling every moment with noise and activity, that requires tremendous strength. The strength to face what's actually happening inside you. The strength to feel what you feel without immediately trying to make it go away. Many people can't tolerate this. They need constant distraction, constant company, constant noise, because being alone with themselves is too uncomfortable, too confronting. They haven't developed the capacity to be with their own inner experience without needing to escape it. But you have, or you're developing it through your time alone. You're learning that you can sit with difficult thoughts and feelings, and they won't destroy you. You're learning that boredom isn't an emergency. You're learning that your own company, even when it's not particularly pleasant, is something you can handle. This is a profound form of emotional resilience. The ability to be with yourself in all your states, not just the comfortable ones. To not need constant external regulation of your emotions and thoughts. To be able to self-soothe, self-reflect, self-contain without always needing someone else to help you manage your inner world. And this strength, this capacity for being with yourself, it makes you more capable in every area of life. You're less desperate for relationships because you can tolerate being alone. You make better decisions because you can sit with uncertainty instead of impulsively acting to make it go away. You're more authentic because you've spent enough time with yourself to know who you are beyond your social persona. The world might see staying home as weakness, as avoidance, as inability to handle life's demands. But you know differently. You know that facing yourself every day, being present for your own experience, sitting with whatever arises without constantly running toward distraction, that's some of the hardest work there is, and you're doing it quietly, without fanfare, without anyone witnessing or applauding, and that's real strength. Now let's close this extended exploration with something that brings it all together. The idea that staying home is not withdrawal from life, but a different way of engaging with it. A gay way that's valid, meaningful, and necessary for certain kinds of people at certain times. Life doesn't only happen in the visible public spaces. It doesn't only happen in achievement, in activity, and social engagement. It also happens in quiet rooms, in internal reflection, in the slow, patient work of understanding yourself and your relationship to existence, in the moments of peace when you're simply being, not doing, or achieving, or performing. Your home, your solitude, your preference for quiet, these aren't barriers between you and real life. They're the conditions that allow you to experience a particular quality of life, a particular depth of presence that's impossible to access in constant activity and social performance. You're not missing out. You're tuning into something different. Something the busy world passes by without noticing. The richness of inner life, the subtle beauty of familiar places, the peace of being exactly yourself without adjustment or performance, the freedom of time that's truly yours, the clarity that comes from regular solitude, the strength that comes from being comfortable with yourself. All of this is real life. It's just a different kind of life than the one that gets celebrated in our culture. But that doesn't make it less valuable. In many ways, it might be more valuable because it's sustainable, because it's authentic to who you actually are rather than who you think you should be, because it allows for depth rather than just breadth, because it creates conditions for wisdom rather than just experience. So honor your preference for staying home, protect it, build your life around it, and trust that in doing so, you're not withdrawing from life but engaging with it in the way that works for you, the way that allows you to be most fully yourself, the way that creates the conditions for you to actually thrive rather than just survive. You're exactly where you need to be, in your home, in your life, in yourself. And that's beautiful. Now, there's an aspect of staying home that we need to explore with particular gentleness, the relationship between solitude and loneliness, because these two experiences, while they can coexist, are fundamentally different in ways that matter deeply. Loneliness is painful. It's the ache of unmet connection, the feeling that you're isolated when you desperately want to be close to someone. Loneliness happens when solitude isn't chosen, when it's forced upon you by circumstances or by patterns you can't seem to change. And it's associated with real health consequences. Higher rates of depression, weakened immune function, increased inflammation, even shorter lifespan. Loneliness is suffering, but solitude, chosen solitude, is something else entirely. It's the peaceful state of being alone without the pain of longing for company. It's feeling complete within yourself, finding genuine satisfaction in your own presence. And the research shows clearly that chosen solitude doesn't just avoid the harms of loneliness, it brings its own distinct benefits. In a comprehensive study published in the British Journal of Psychology, researchers distinguished between what they called social withdrawal, which often stems from anxiety or avoidance, and solitude seeking, which comes from genuine preference. They found that people who actively chose solitude reported higher levels of emotional stability, deeper self-awareness, and stronger sense of personal identity than those who avoided it. Think about the difference in your own life. There might be times when you're home alone and it feels empty, when you wish someone would call or stop by, when the silence feels heavy rather than peaceful. That's loneliness, and it deserves compassion and attention. But then there are times when you're home alone, and it feels like exactly where you're meant to be, when the silence is like a soft blanket, when you can't imagine wanting to be anywhere else. That's solitude. That's chosen, nourishing, restorative aloneness. The key, psychologists say, is whether the time alone fills you up or empties you out. Do you finish a weekend at home feeling refreshed, more like yourself? Or do you finish it feeling more disconnected, more uncertain, more hollow? The answer tells you whether you're experiencing healthy solitude or something that might need attention. And here's something important. You can love staying home and still value connection. These aren't opposites. Some of the people who most appreciate solitude are also deeply capable of rich, meaningful relationships. They simply need the rhythm of connection and separation, the movement between being with others and being with themselves. They're not choosing one or the other. They're choosing both in the balance that works for them. There's a particular kind of strength that develops in people who are comfortable being alone. Not the loud, obvious kind of strength, but something quieter, more rooted, a kind of self-reliance that comes from knowing you can handle your own company, that you don't need constant external input to feel okay. Psychologists call this emotional self-sufficiency, and it's one of the most overlooked forms of resilience. When you're comfortable alone, you're less vulnerable to staying in relationships or situations that don't serve you just to avoid being by yourself. You're less likely to make desperate decisions out of fear of solitude. You can evaluate your life and your choices from a place of clarity rather than panic. Think about that. How many people stay in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, friendships that feel obligatory, simply because they can't bear the thought of being alone? How many decisions are made from a place of avoiding solitude rather than choosing what's actually right? When you're someone who genuinely enjoys staying home, who's made peace with your own company, you have a freedom that others don't. You can say no without guilt. You can choose quality over quantity in your relationships. You can let go of connections that aren't mutual without feeling like you're losing your last lifeline. In a longitudinal study spanning 15 years, researchers at the University of California found that adults who reported comfort with solitude in their 20s showed significantly higher rates of life satisfaction in their 40s compared to those who reported anxiety around being alone. The researchers suggested that comfort with solitude led to better decision-making about relationships, careers, and life direction, because these individuals weren't making choices from a place of desperation or fear. Let that truth settle. Your ability to be alone, to be genuinely okay in your own company, it's not a weakness or a lack. It's a profound form of strength. It's the foundation from which healthy choices grow. And there's another dimension to this strength, something about boundaries and the particular clarity that comes from knowing what you need and being willing to protect it. People who love staying home often develop exceptional boundary skills, not because they're naturally better at saying no, but because they've had to practice it more. Every invitation declined is an act of boundary setting. Every explanation of why you prefer smaller gatherings or one-on-one time is an assertion of your needs. Every decision to honor your preference, even when it disappoints someone else, is practice in valuing yourself. And these skills, this comfort with setting and maintaining boundaries, they serve you in every relationship and situation in your life. You learn that it's okay for people to be disappointed with your choices. You learn that your needs are valid even when others don't understand them. You learn that protecting your well-being sometimes means prioritizing yourself over others' preferences. This doesn't make you selfish. It makes you self-aware. And self-aware people actually make better friends, better partners, better colleagues, because they know what they can genuinely offer and what they can't. They don't overextend and then resent. They don't say yes to keep the peace and then withdraw when it becomes too much. They're honest about their capacity from the beginning. Think about the last time you declined an invitation and felt guilty about it. That guilt, it's learned. It comes from absorbing the message that your preferences matter less than others' expectations, that being accommodating is more important than being authentic. But what if you release that guilt? What if you trusted that the people who truly care about you want you to honor your needs, even when those needs don't align with their desires? What if you believe that saying no when you need to stay home is an act of integrity rather than rejection? The relationships that can accommodate your boundaries, that can respect your need for solitude without taking it personally, those are the relationships worth keeping. They're the ones built on mutual regard rather than obligation. And they become deeper, more authentic, more sustainable, precisely because they're not based on you contorting yourself to fit someone else's expectations. And this self-awareness, this deep familiarity with your own inner landscape, it changes how you move through the world. You become less reactive, less swayed by others' opinions, more confident in your own judgment, not because you're arrogant or closed off, but because you spend enough time with yourself to trust what you find there. People who love staying home often develop a quality that others find both mysterious and attractive, a kind of centeredness, a sense that they're comfortable in their own skin in a way that doesn't depend on external validation. They're not performing or proving anything. They're just themselves, steady, grounded, present. This quality doesn't come from isolation or withdrawal. It comes from having spent enough time alone to know who you are when no one's watching. And that knowledge, that bone-deep familiarity with yourself, it's something no amount of social interaction can give you. It only grows in quiet. Now let's talk about something that might feel a bit vulnerable. the judgment that often comes with choosing to stay home, the way society frames it as antisocial or sad, or like you're wasting your life. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness, that treats a full social calendar as a sign of success and popularity, as proof of worth. The influencers showing their exciting lives, the motivational quotes about saying yes to everything, the subtle pressure to always be out there, doing things, making memories, living your best life. And against that backdrop, choosing to stay home can feel like admitting defeat, like you're failing at life somehow. The friend who always cancels plans becomes the punchline. The person who prefers solitude gets labeled as antisocial, maybe even broken. There's an assumption that if you really had the option, if you really could be out there, you would be. And the fact that you're choosing to stay home must mean something's wrong. But here's what that narrative misses. It assumes there's only one valid way to live, one template for a good life. And anyone who doesn't fit that template must be settling or missing out or too damaged to participate fully. That's not just wrong. It's profoundly dismissive of the very real, very valid experience of people whose nervous systems, temperaments, and preferences are simply different. In a cultural analysis published in the Journal of Social Psychology, researchers examined how different societies view solitude and found something striking. In many Eastern cultures, solitude is seen as a sign of wisdom, maturity, and spiritual depth. Time alone isn't something to avoid, but something to cultivate. But in Western culture, particularly in the United States, solitude is often pathologized, treated as something that needs to be fixed or overcome. The result is that millions of people who are perfectly healthy, perfectly happy, perfectly fulfilled in their choice to spend time alone end up feeling like they're doing something wrong. They apologize for declining invitations. They make excuses for why they can't go out. They frame their preference as if it's a personal failing rather than a valid choice. And that internalized shame, that sense that you should want something different than what you actually want, it's corrosive. It makes you doubt your own experience. It makes you wonder if maybe everyone else is right and you're the one who needs to change. But what if you don't? What if your preference for staying home is just as valid as someone else's preference for being out? What if there's nothing wrong with finding your deepest joy in quiet evenings, familiar routines, and your own company? The research strongly suggests that solitude preference is not a disorder to be cured, but a temperament to be honored. People who love staying home and who live in alignment with that preference, who don't force themselves into social patterns that drain them, these people show better mental health outcomes, higher life satisfaction, and stronger emotional regulation than those who fight against their nature trying to be someone they're not. Let yourself sit with that. You're not broken. You're not missing out. You're not wasting your life. You're living according to your own design in the way that actually nourishes you. And that's not just okay. That's wisdom. Think about the people in your life who truly know you. The ones who've seen you light up talking about a book you're reading or a project you're working on in your own time. The ones who understand that when you say you're happy at home, you actually mean it. Those people get it. They see that your quiet life isn't empty, but full in ways that others might not recognize. And yes, there will always be people who don't understand, who push you to be more social, more available, more like them. But their inability to understand your experience doesn't make your experience any less real or valid. You get to define what a good life looks like for you. And if that life includes more time at home than out, more solitude than socializing, more depth than breadth, then that's exactly the life you should be living. There's a particular kind of peace that settles over the mind when you stop trying to be someone you're not. When you stop apologizing for your preferences and start honoring them instead. That peace, that alignment between who you are and how you're living, it's worth more than all the social approval in the world. Now let's explore something that often surprises people: the relationship between staying home and physical health. Because while we often think of home as a place to rest, there are actual physiological benefits to the kind of life that includes significant time in solitude. We've already talked about cortisol, the stress hormone that decreases in calm, familiar environments. But the benefits go deeper than that. When your nervous system isn't constantly activated by social demands and environmental unpredictability, several important things happen in your body. First, your immune system functions more effectively. Chronic stress, the kind that comes from constantly being in stimulating or demanding environments, suppresses immune function. It reduces the production of antibodies and makes you more vulnerable to illness. But when you're in an environment where you feel safe and in control, where demands are low and rest is possible, your immune system can do its job properly. A 2016 study in psychosomatic medicine found that people who reported regular, restorative alone time had higher levels of certain immune markers and lower rates of stress-related illness compared to those who reported little time alone, or time alone that felt isolating rather than restorative. Think about how often you get sick when you're constantly on the go versus how you feel after several days of quiet rest at home. Your body knows the difference. It responds to the safety and calm of your home environment by shifting resources from defense and vigilance to repair and restoration. Sleep quality improves too. People who maintain regular calm routines at home, who aren't constantly disrupting their circadian rhythms with late nights out or irregular schedules, tend to sleep more deeply and wake more rested. And sleep, as you probably know, is when the body does most of its repair work. Cells regenerate, memories consolidate, the brain clears out metabolic waste. All of this happens most effectively when you're following a consistent sleep pattern in a familiar, comfortable environment. And then there's inflammation, which has become one of the most important markers of long-term health. Chronic inflammation is linked to almost every major health condition, from heart disease to diabetes to Alzheimer's. And one of the strongest drivers of inflammation is chronic stress. When you live in a way that minimizes unnecessary stress, that allows your nervous system to spend more time in rest mode than fight or flight mode, inflammation levels naturally decrease. Your body isn't constantly responding to perceived threats. It can relax into the basic maintenance and healing that keeps you healthy over the long term. None of this is to say that staying home is inherently healthier than going out. It's not that simple. But for people whose nervous systems are wired to find restoration in solitude, in familiar routines, in low-stimulation environments, honoring that wiring leads to better health outcomes than fighting against it. Your body isn't wrong for wanting what it wants. It's trying to tell you something. And when you listen, when you give it the conditions it needs to thrive, it responds with better function, better resilience, better health. Let your breath deepen for a moment. Feel how your body settles when you're here, in this quiet, in this familiar space. That settling, that release of tension, it's not just comfort. It's your body doing exactly what it's designed to do in safety. It's healing happening in real time. And speaking of the body, let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough: the sensory experience of being home versus being out in the world. For people with high sensory sensitivity, and there are many more of you than you might think, the world outside is overwhelming in ways that others often don't understand. The fluorescent lights in stores, the competing conversations in restaurants, the unpredictable sounds of traffic, the textures of unfamiliar fabrics, the smells of perfume and food and cleaning products all mixing together. Each of these inputs registers in your nervous system. Each one requires processing. And when you're someone with high sensitivity, the volume of all this input can become genuinely painful, exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with social anxiety and everything to do with the nervous system's threshold for stimulation. Dr. Elaine Aron, who pioneered research into high sensitivity, estimates that about 15 to 20% of the population has a more sensitive nervous system that processes sensory information more deeply. For these people, what others experience as normal levels of stimulation can feel like assault, and home becomes not just a preference but a necessity. The only environment where the sensory volume is turned down to a manageable level. At home, you control the sensory input. The lighting is how you like it. The sounds are predictable or chosen. The temperature is comfortable. The textures around you are familiar and safe. Your nervous system doesn't have to work overtime filtering and processing information. It can rest. And when your nervous system gets to rest from that constant processing, energy becomes available for other things, for thought, for creativity, for feeling your feelings instead of just managing stimulation, for being present in your body instead of dissociated from it because it's too much to feel everything at once. If you're someone who's been told you're too sensitive, too particular, too easily overwhelmed, let me offer a different frame. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's just calibrated differently than others. And the fact that you've learned to create an environment where you can function comfortably, that's not weakness. That's profound self-knowledge and self-care. Think about how you've arranged your space, the soft lighting you prefer, the particular blanket that feels just right, the way sounds are muffled or controlled. You've created a sensory sanctuary, whether you thought of it that way or not. And that sanctuary allows you to exist in your body with less pain, less overwhelm, less constant adjustment. This isn't about avoiding the world. It's about acknowledging that your nervous system has different needs and meeting those needs with compassion instead of judgment. Now let's turn to something that might feel counterintuitive: how staying home can actually improve your relationships with others. There's an assumption that people who prefer solitude are bad at relationships, that they're distant or unavailable or incapable of deep connection. But the research suggests something quite different. People who are comfortable alone often form deeper, more authentic relationships than those who can't bear solitude. Why? Because when you don't need other people to fill a desperate void, when you're okay on your own, you can choose relationships based on genuine connection rather than need. You're not clinging to friendships out of fear of being alone. You're not staying in unhealthy dynamics because anything feels better than solitude. You can evaluate relationships clearly and keep the ones that truly nourish you while letting go of the ones that don't. There's a concept in psychology called differentiation, the ability to maintain your sense of self within close relationships. People with strong differentiation can be deeply intimate without losing themselves in the other person. They can be close without being fused. And differentiation develops largely through comfort with solitude. through knowing you can be separate and still be okay. In a study of long-term couples, researchers found that partners who maintained individual interests and regular alone time reported higher relationship satisfaction than those who did everything together. The solitude didn't create distance. It created the space needed for each person to remain themselves, which paradoxically made intimacy deeper and more sustainable. Think about your own friendships, the ones that feel effortless and real. Chances are, those are relationships where you don't have to perform, where you can be quiet together, where absence doesn't threaten the connection. Those relationships work precisely because they're not based on constant contact or fear of abandonment. They're based on genuine mutual regard. And when you see your friends or family after time apart, after you've had time to be fully yourself in solitude, you bring your whole self to the interaction. You're not depleted or resentful. You're present. You actually want to be there. And that quality of presence, that genuine desire for connection rather than obligation, it makes relationships richer. Your preference for staying home doesn't make you a bad friend. It makes you selective. And selectivity, when it comes from self-knowledge rather than fear, creates the conditions for the deepest kind of friendship. The people who truly matter will understand this about you. They won't take your need for solitude personally. They'll respect it because they respect you. And the relationships that can't accommodate your needs, the ones that demand constant availability or guilt you for choosing yourself sometimes, those probably aren't serving you anyway. Let yourself release any guilt you're carrying about being the friend who cancels, who needs more notice, who prefers smaller gatherings or one-on-one time. You're not failing at friendship. You're being honest about what you can offer and what you need. And that honesty creates the foundation for relationships that actually last. There's something else we should explore: the particular quality of time that exists when you're home alone. The way time itself seems to move differently. Out in the world, time is structured by external demands, appointments and schedules and other people's rhythms. Even in leisure, social time has a particular pace to it, shaped by group energy and the need to coordinate with others. But when you're home alone, time becomes yours in a way it rarely is otherwise. You can move through your day at your own pace. Spend 2 hours on something that interests you without feeling like you're holding anyone up. Sit with a thought until it's fully formed. Let tasks take as long as they take without rushing. This kind of temporal autonomy, the freedom to pace your own experience, it's rarer than we think, and it has real psychological value. Psychologists studying time perception have found that people report feeling like they have more time, like time expands when they're engaged in self-directed activity in solitude. It's not that the hours are actually longer, but the subjective experience of time changes when you're not constantly checking the clock or coordinating with others. Think about a weekend day when you have no obligations, no plans, nowhere to be. How different that feels from a day that's filled with scheduled activities. Even fun activities, when they're scheduled, create a kind of temporal pressure. But a completely open day, a day where you can follow your own rhythm, that feels spacious in a way that's almost physical. This spaciousness has value beyond just feeling pleasant. It allows deeper engagement with whatever you're doing, whether that's reading or working on a project or literally doing nothing at all. You can sink into the experience instead of skimming across its surface. And this depth of engagement, this ability to be fully absorbed in something without the pull of the clock, it's where satisfaction comes from. Not from doing more things, but from doing things more completely, more attentively, more in alignment with your own natural rhythm. People who stay home often develop a different relationship with time than those who are constantly busy. Time becomes less of a commodity to be managed and more of a medium to be inhabited. Less about efficiency and more about experience. And that shift, that move from time pressure to time richness, it changes the fundamental quality of life. You're not wasting time by spending it at home. You're using it in a way that actually allows you to experience it fully. And that might be the most precious use of time there is. Now let's talk about something deeply personal. The inner life that flourishes in solitude. The thoughts and feelings and imaginings that only have room to exist when the world is quiet. Everyone has an inner life, of course. But for people who spend significant time alone, who have learned to be comfortable in their own mental landscape, the inner life becomes extraordinarily rich, detailed, complex. It becomes not just a background to the external life, but a world unto itself. You know this if you experience it. The conversations you have with yourself, the elaborate daydreams, the questions you turn over and over, not because you need to solve them, but because the thinking itself is engaging. The emotional nuances you can track in yourself when there's no external noise to drown them out. This isn't escapism, though it's often dismissed as such. It's a form of engagement with reality, just a different dimension of reality than the external material world. Your thoughts and feelings and imaginings are real. They shape how you understand everything else. And giving them space and attention isn't withdrawal, it's depth. Psychologists studying fantasy and imagination have found that people with rich inner lives show enhanced empathy, better problem-solving abilities, and greater emotional complexity. The ability to live comfortably in your own mind, to follow trains of thought wherever they lead, to imagine possibilities beyond what's immediately visible. These are profound cognitive and emotional skills. And they develop most fully in solitude when there's nothing competing for your attention, when you can let your mind unfold in its own way without direction or judgment. Think about the difference between consuming entertainment and sitting with your own thoughts. Both have value, but there's something uniquely nourishing about the latter. When you let your mind wander without trying to fill it with input, you often discover things about yourself, about life, about what matters to you that no external source could teach you. This is where meaning gets made, not in grand external experiences, but in the quiet internal processing of those experiences. Not in what happens to you, but in how you think about what happens to you. Your inner life isn't less real than your outer life. For you, it might actually be more real, more vivid, more meaningful. And the time you spend at home, the time you spend in solitude, that's not time away from life. That's time deepening your relationship with the most important landscape you'll ever inhabit, the landscape of your own consciousness. Let that settle. Your thoughts matter. Your inner world matters. And the time you give it is time well spent. And this brings us to something crucial. The difference between solitude as rest and solitude as avoidance. Because this distinction matters, and navigating it with honesty and compassion is essential. There are times when staying home is genuinely restorative, when it fills your tank and helps you feel more yourself. And then there are times when staying home is about avoiding something difficult, something that scares you or overwhelms you or makes you feel inadequate. Both are understandable, both are human, but they lead to different outcomes and they require different responses. Restorative solitude feels spacious. You end a period of alone time feeling refreshed, clearer, more capable of engaging with life when you choose to. You're not staying home because you can't handle the world. You're staying home because it's genuinely where you want to be, where you feel most yourself. But avoidant solitude feels constrictive. You end a period of alone time feeling more anxious, more disconnected, more convinced that you couldn't handle going out even if you wanted to. The walls of home, which usually feel protective, start to feel like a cage. And the thought of leaving, which should feel optional, starts to feel impossible. If you're experiencing the latter, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you're struggling with something, anxiety or depression or past hurt, that's making the world feel unsafe. And that struggle deserves compassion and probably support, whether that's therapy or medication, or simply talking honestly with someone who cares about you. The goal isn't to force yourself out when everything in you is screaming to stay in. The goal is to understand what you're protecting yourself from and whether staying home is helping you heal or helping you hide. Sometimes it's both. And that's okay. Healing isn't linear. But if you notice that your home is starting to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a hiding place, if your solitude is accompanied by increasing anxiety about the world outside, if you're saying no to things you actually want to do because the fear is just too much, then it might be worth gently examining what's happening, because you deserve to choose solitude, not feel trapped in it. You deserve to stay home because it nourishes you, not because everything else terrifies you. And if you're not sure what you're experiencing, pay attention to how you feel after time alone, restored or depleted, more yourself or more lost. The answer will tell you what you need to know. For most of you listening, though, the solitude you're experiencing is the healthy kind, the chosen kind, the kind that makes you more capable of engaging with life on your own terms, not less. And that brings us to something beautiful, the way staying home can become a spiritual practice. Whether you think of it in religious terms or not, there's a long tradition across many spiritual and philosophical systems of solitude as a path to deeper truth. The desert fathers and mothers, the Buddhist monks in their caves, Thoreau at Walden Pond, the vision quests of indigenous traditions, all of these recognize something fundamental, that truth often reveals itself in silence, in solitude, in the absence of distraction. You don't have to frame your love of staying home in spiritual terms if that doesn't resonate, but there is something almost sacred about the quality of presence that becomes possible when you're alone. When you're not performing for anyone, not trying to be anything other than what you are, not filling the silence with noise just because silence makes you uncomfortable. In that undefended space, you can encounter yourself without the layers of social performance. And sometimes, if you're very still, very quiet, you can encounter something deeper than yourself, whatever you want to call it. The universe, consciousness, God, the mystery at the heart of existence. Or maybe you encounter nothing so grand. Maybe you just encounter this moment exactly as it is, without needing it to be anything else. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. People who practice meditation talk about this quality of awareness, this ability to simply be without needing to do or achieve or become. And you cultivate that same quality every time you sit quietly at home, content in your own company, not rushing to fill the space with activity or entertainment. You're practicing presence. You're practicing acceptance of what is. You're practicing the radical act of being enough exactly as you are in this moment without needing anything to be different. That's not wasting your life. That's touching something most people spend their whole lives running from. The simple truth of existence itself. Let yourself be here now, not trying to be anywhere else, not wishing this moment were different. Just here, just this, just you, exactly as you are. This is what home offers. Not an escape from life, but a return to the most fundamental reality. The reality of your own existence, your own breath, your own heartbeat in the quiet. The simple life you're living, the one that doesn't require constant entertainment or consumption. It's not a lesser life, it's a freer one. And freedom, real freedom, is priceless. Now let's talk about seasons of life and how the relationship with staying home changes over time. Maybe you're young, in a phase of life when everyone around you is going out, making memories, living loudly, and you're not. You're home, and sometimes that feels wrong, like you're missing the experiences you're supposed to be having. Or maybe you're older, past the years when you felt pressure to be social, settled into a rhythm of life that feels right but occasionally lonely, wondering if you should be doing more, connecting more, before time runs out. Wherever you are, know this. There is no schedule you're supposed to follow. No timeline that says you should be more social in your 20s and less in your 60s, or vice versa. The right amount of social engagement is whatever feels right to you in this season of your life. Some people are social in youth and become more solitary with age. Others are the opposite. Some maintain the same preference throughout their whole lives. None of these patterns is more valid than the others. What matters is whether you're living in alignment with who you are right now, not who you think you should be or who you were 10 years ago. Life is long. You contain multitudes. You're allowed to change, and you're allowed to stay exactly the same. If you're young and preferring home while your peers are out building social lives, you're not doing it wrong. You're listening to what you need. Those friendships you're not forming because you're home, they probably wouldn't have sustained you anyway. The ones that matter, the deep ones, those will find you. And they'll be all the richer because they're built on genuine connection rather than proximity and habit. If you're older and finding that you want more solitude than you did before, that's not giving up or withdrawing from life. That's wisdom. You've learned what actually matters to you. You've earned the right to spend your time and energy on what nourishes you rather than what you think you're supposed to want. Your life doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Not your friends, not your parents, not the lives you see online. It only has to look like yours. And if yours looks like a lot of quiet evenings at home, then that's exactly what it should look like. Let the judgment, internal and external, fall away. You're not behind. You're not missing out. You're living the one life you actually have in the way that feels most true to you. And that's not just okay. That's beautiful. Let's talk about something tender. The shame that can come with loving to stay home. The feeling that you should want something different, that your life should look more exciting, more full, more like the lives you see others living. Maybe you scroll through social media and see friends at parties, on trips, out doing things that look fun and vibrant and alive, and you feel a twist in your stomach. Not quite envy, more like doubt. Like maybe you're doing it wrong. Like maybe you're missing something essential. Or maybe people ask what you did over the weekend, and when you say you stayed home, you see the flicker of pity in their eyes. And you start adding qualifiers. I was tired. I had stuff to do. As if staying home because you wanted to isn't a good enough reason. That shame, that sense that your preference is something to hide or apologize for, it's learned. It's not inherent to the experience of staying home. It comes from absorbing messages that say your way of being is wrong. But here's the truth. There is nothing shameful about knowing what you need and giving it to yourself. Nothing shameful about choosing peace over performance. Nothing shameful about living a quiet life in a loud world. The people who judge you for staying home, they're usually projecting their own fears. They can't imagine being comfortable alone, so they assume you must be miserable. Or they've built their identity around being social, so your different choice feels like a challenge to that identity. But their discomfort with your choices isn't evidence that your choices are wrong. It's just evidence that they're different from you. And different isn't wrong. You don't owe anyone excitement. You don't owe anyone a life that makes sense to them. You don't owe anyone proof that you're living well by their standards. You only owe yourself honesty and kindness, and the courage to keep choosing what actually works for you even when it doesn't look like what works for others. Let the shame go. It doesn't belong to you. It never did. What belongs to you is the quiet satisfaction of a life lived in alignment with your true nature. And that's nothing to apologize for. Think about the future for a moment. About growing older in a world that's getting louder, more demanding, more overstimulating by the day. Your ability to be content at home, to find satisfaction in simple pleasures and your own company, that's going to serve you more and more as time goes on. While others are frantically trying to keep up with an increasingly chaotic world, you'll have the skills to step back, to create sanctuary, to protect your peace. You're not behind. You're ahead. You're learning now what everyone eventually needs to learn: how to be okay with yourself, how to find joy that doesn't depend on constant external stimulation, how to create a life that feels sustainable rather than exhausting. These skills, this comfort with solitude, this ability to be at home in yourself, literally and figuratively, these are going to matter more, not less, as you move through life. You're building something quietly, a foundation of self-knowledge and self-sufficiency that will hold you when everything else is unstable. And that foundation, that's the real work of a life, not the resume of experiences or the number of friends or the exciting stories, but the deep, solid knowing of who you are and what you need. You're already doing the work, and you're doing it beautifully. As we begin to wind down this exploration, let's return to where we started. The simple truth that staying home, choosing solitude, preferring your own company, these aren't deficits. They're not things to overcome or fix or apologize for. They're expressions of a particular kind of nervous system, a particular temperament, a particular way of being human that's just as valid as any other. The introvert who recharges alone. The highly sensitive person who needs control over their sensory environment. The creative who finds their best ideas in silence. The person with social anxiety who's working to expand their comfort zone, but still needs home as a safe base. The simply content homebody who genuinely prefers pajamas to parties. All of these are real. All of them are okay. All of them deserve respect and accommodation, not judgment. You're not broken. You're not missing out. You're not wasting your life. You're living it in the way that works for you. And that's the only measure that matters. The research is clear. People who live in alignment with their true preferences, whatever those preferences are, show better mental health, better physical health, better life satisfaction than those who force themselves into patterns that don't fit. So your job isn't to become someone else. It's to become more fully yourself, to lean into what actually works for you, to build a life that honors your needs instead of fighting against them. And if that life looks quieter, smaller, more focused on inner experience than outer adventure, then that's exactly what it should look like. You have permission, though you don't need anyone's permission but your own. You have permission to stay home, to say no, to choose yourself, to protect your energy, to live quietly, to find joy in small things, to be enough exactly as you are. The world will keep spinning, people will keep judging, culture will keep pushing its one-size-fits-all template, and you can keep choosing your own path anyway. Because at the end of your life, you won't regret the parties you didn't go to or the social status you didn't accumulate. You'll only regret the times you betrayed yourself, the times you said yes when everything in you was screaming no, the times you let other people's expectations drown out your own quiet knowing. Don't let that happen. You know what you need. You know what fills you up and what drains you. You know the difference between rest and avoidance, between chosen solitude and forced isolation. Trust that knowing. Build your life around it, and let everyone else figure out their own path while you walk yours with quiet confidence. You're doing better than you think. You're exactly where you need to be. And the life you're living, the quiet, home-centered, deeply felt life, it's a beautiful life. It's your life, and it's enough. More than enough. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for giving yourself this time to reflect, to feel seen, to know you're not alone in preferring to be alone. If this resonated with you, if you felt understood, consider subscribing to the Slumbering archive. There are more explorations like this waiting for you. More quiet conversations about the things that matter. More validation for the life you're actually living instead of the one you think you should be living. And now let yourself rest. Let the thoughts settle. Let the validation sink in. You don't need to change anything. You don't need to do anything differently tomorrow. Just be here now, in your home, in your body, in your own quiet life, exactly as you are. That's enough. You're enough, and you always have been. Sleep well, friend. You're exactly where you belong.